when we hire people now, you got to make sure that they're the right candidates. You know, you got to screen them properly. And you also got to do, I recommend the personality test.
Yeah.
Welcome to Livestream. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Plains, with my co-host, Jeremy Applegate. Welcome, Jeremy. How you doing today?
Not bad, Doc. Not bad. I'm interested on today's topic. I wanna understand from an entrepreneur's standpoint, how do you scale your business? You know, I want to get that information from you.
Let's first identify what the difference between scale and scaling is.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have a company or you have one business, right? When do you make the decision to start scaling? When do you think that should happen?
That's a great question. I think that businesses need to create goals, right? And then use those goals to determine when you're going to grow, when you're going to scale your team and scale your organization. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I personally can admit myself that I went scaling very quickly before I figured out how to scale. So I went and opened up a dental practice 2 hours away from here. As you know, we're based on the Treasure Coast, but we went and opened up a practice in Orlando because I believed that I had the right team to start scaling. And, you know, the world has a way to work. I figured out that I wasn't ready. So we didn't have the correct infrastructure. Yeah. So it's like Brandon Dawson always says, what are the 3 M's? You got to model, you got to mimic, and you got to master, right? Yep. So we went through a transitional phase that we went through a lot of headaches. So I believe that if you're going to start scaling, you got to perfect your own, you know, business, and you got to have systems and tools before you can start replicating.
Yeah, I see, and I think that, you know, you kind of took the tough end of the stick there, but ultimately it came out as a win, right?
Yeah.
But it was a little stressful there for a while, I'm sure.
Very stressful. It was a lot of risk and a lot of financial implications that, you know, were affected by scaling too fast.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of break points when you should hire the right people, hire more people, get a corporate facility, possibly add more locations, invest in IT infrastructure, marketing infrastructure, procurement infrastructure, accounting, a C-suite. At what point do you know when to add all these elements to grow your company?
Yeah, that's the $1 billion question, I think, because I don't know if anybody really has the right answer on that.
I believe like once you shouldn't really be adding a lot of people till you are at least in average, each employee is doing anywhere from $300,000 to $350,000 of revenue per employee before you start adding more employees.
Okay.
Because there comes a point that you're going to have all these employees, but yet your profitability is going to get decreased.
Yep.
So you got to make sure that when you hire more employees, they have a reasoning why you hire more employees. Like we're currently at 82 employees right now, and our average is anywhere from 160 to 200,000, which is not terrible, but we possibly are overstaffed by 5 to 10 employees.
Yeah, at this moment.
One big mistake that I made personally was that I made a huge investment in IT infrastructure, and we were probably $5 or $6 million short from being able to add that infrastructure at that time.
It seemed like a good idea just because of, you know, security and all the other stuff, but yeah, I mean,
and ease of use.
Yeah. Oh yeah, ease of use. It's been a win on that aspect. But yeah, I can understand the dynamics of it financially for sure.
Like you talk to a lot of, you know, dentists that they have 3 or 4 dental practices, and they're like, I want to hire a C-suite. I want a CFO. I want, you know, a CCO. I want a director. I want regional managers. I want revenue cycle specialists, and, you know, all these different departments. But that doesn't necessarily make you win.
Well, wages is one of the most expensive expenses a business can have, right?
Exactly.
So you got to be careful with that.
So you go and hire a CFO that you're paying $250,000 a year, plus maybe some stock and you know, and if you're not a dentist that is practicing in the dental chair, by the time you know it, you can go bankrupt.
Yep.
Which we see that a lot of these DSOs that they claim they're DSOs, they start failing within the first couple of years they fail.
I think that everybody's in such a rush to get that DSO tag
Yeah,
that they're, just wait. What's the big rush?
exactly. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make more money.
Right.
It does give you, when you get DSO rights, you do get purchasing power and certain leeways, but is it worth all the risk that you have to put financially in order to make it happen?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you really ran the organization for the first 6 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it was pound for pound probably the cleanest in regards to financial profitability at that point.
Yeah.
We've added maybe 25 to 30 employees since then. Well, I think when you started, how many employees did we have?
We were in the 50s. Yeah. I mean, we were like at 55 when I came on board.
Exactly. So as you know, in the state of Florida, personally, I'm not sure if this is countrywide, but once you get over 50 employees, you need to, there's a lot more liability.
Yep.
So you have a huge bullseye on your back. So, not only are your competitors, but all the different agencies are making sure that you're doing everything properly.
Yeah.
A lot more than if you're a small business.
And I think that scaling, I think that's one of the, this is just my own opinion, but one of the last infrastructure pieces that you should bring on is when you get to that 50 mark, you need to have some kind of human resources available.
Yeah, that's a great point. You just read my mind. I think HR is extremely important.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of, companies out there that can be the HR for you, but there's nothing like having your own HR manager.
That's true. They know the ins and outs of your organization, and you don't have to catch them up. They know these people on a personal level. It's a big deal, and I think that when you try to do that third party, your team is not as receptive
as they should be. I think now that we're talking about this, I think one important element that I forgot to say was the people. When we hire people now, you got to make sure that they're the right candidates. You got to screen them properly, and you also got to I recommend the personality test.
Yeah. That
definitely helps you identify the people that you're recruiting and hiring. Because we go back, you don't want to continue to hire all these people just to fill in the gaps. Because as you start going over all these breakpoints, you got to have people in your organization that are willing to adapt and grow, or are going to stay exactly where they are.
Yeah, that's well said. Because that's a big, again, we've said this 100 times. Wages, employees, they're the biggest risk that an organization has. And it costs, I think we said this in a prior podcast, it costs like $30,000 to recruit and train an individual. So, you got to find the right person. So why not put forth the effort right then and there?
Yeah, I personally hire every single time I hire an employee. I believe that I hire them because I believe they have an opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
Because as you start scaling your company and you start growing it and revenue and more departments, you want people that are going to fill in those departments for you.
Yeah, for sure.
That ideally they're people that have been with you, that understand your culture, your mindset, understand the other individuals in the organization.
I think that's part of the scaling also is understanding what this person brings to the table right now, but also understanding the opportunity that they're going to have to impact the organization in other ways.
Yeah.
That's a big part of scaling too. You just can't scale for today. You have to scale for tomorrow.
Yeah, and if you're going to start scaling and you're going to go into different states, or different, I personally had 2 practices in the Treasure Coast, and I didn't have any real clue of the implications of going 2 hours away.
Yeah.
That's a lot harder. Because
you said that great. Location also, you got to have a viable location, when you're scaling your business.
Yeah.
You were only 2 hours away, but some people are like, hey, I stumbled into this doctor in Alaska, and he wants to sell me his practice.
Yeah, just because the practice is available, there's definitely always going to be dental practices or other businesses to buy, but you just got to make sure that you're equipped and you're staffed properly, and you got the financial capabilities to be able to do it. I always say that for the first 5 to 10 years, just get ready to invest in your company as much as you can. And don't expect huge profits because that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, a lot of these guys go and buy exotic sports cars because they made six figures, and then by the time they know it, they can't continue to grow.
And then you always hear, man, I wish I wouldn't have spent money on that, or I wish I would have saved on that, or I wish I would have done this differently, because now you see that you need the scalable infrastructure. You know, you needed that rev cycle person, or you needed this person, and you can't do that because you spent that money already.
That's correct. I think that if you're going to hire a C-suite, because I'm sure that's when do you hire a C-suite?
Yeah.
I think your collective revenue needs to be above $25 million.
That's probably true.
$25 million before you can bring in a full-on C-suite.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to C-suite people. I mean, because we've both been in that situation, but they add value in different ways. They're not necessarily always going to be boots on the ground, so to speak. So you need to make sure that boots are on the ground first.
Well, you've personally seen a company you worked for in your past that they brought in a C-suite that had no dental experience.
Yes.
And that's a big disaster.
My Atlanta. I mean, that was something special there, let me tell you what. And it's different if you have those individuals in those roles and they're willing to receive information. Like, if they were smart about it, they would have said, hey, all you guys know dental.
Yeah, you guys are the experts in it. Please help us.
Yeah, and it was a power trip, ultimately. It was like, we're going to do it my way. Listen, no disrespect, but when you start tracking the success of your organization by procedure code,
yeah, there's no way you're going to succeed.
There's no way you're going to fix the organization. I mean, a post-op appointment, which has a zero charge, is the same value as a crown. That's $1,500. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that?
No, you got to be definitely careful on who you hire, because they can easily make you go bankrupt.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
So I always give the new hires flexibility.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, and then at the end I start putting on the pressure, because it's your business and you got to make sure to protect it. Just because they're executives or they come from previous executive experience doesn't mean that they understand your vision and the way that you want your organization to run, whatever you're doing.
I think, I like how you said that there too, because I think that when you're scaling your infrastructure, you have to have people on the same page, and you have to have people that understand your mission, vision, values.
You have to. So a lot of companies go and they're like, oh, let's bring in more people, let's bring in HR, let's bring in accounting, and they're barely breaking $1 million of revenue.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what business you're doing, that is just too fast.
And my EBITDA percentages are low. Well, I mean, that's because you didn't do it in the right way.
Yeah. So you got to be very careful before you start scaling. I can personally say that if I would have gotten one more curveball when I did that practice in Orlando, I would have lost that practice. Luckily, I had a good partner and I had a good team that went up there to help me and support me. But if I didn't, I lost 5 of my key individual employees within 3 months.
Yeah.
That were used in this area to manage and make sure that daily operations was going on.
I think the other part of this conversation is the entrepreneurs or the owners that scale too slow. You know what I mean? Like, you're missing opportunities. You're missing opportunities to add the rev cycle, or to add the HR, or to add the procurement to help you be more efficient as an organization. And I think that's part of this too. I think that timing is everything, and it's a really significant challenge to figure out the perfect timing. Maybe the perfect timing is not there.
Yeah, that's great what you just said. I don't think there's ever a perfect time. Yeah. I go a lot with my gut, and when I should bring in other operational individuals to come in. But obviously you got to understand your finances. You got to understand your financials, because you can't bring in, $100,000 salary if you're not profitable, and a lot of these executive positions that are going to help you grow the organization, you got to pay for them. So, and plus benefits, plus whatever. And at the end of the day, if you're not financially stable, you're going to go into a disaster.
What I would suggest that everybody does is build annual budgets, right? And build your scaling into those annual budgets. Like you said, hey, you shouldn't bring in C-suite until after your $25 million. Well, if you're in 2023, if you're projected to do $28 million, then maybe it's time to start
start
building those
recruiting.
salaries in there and
Exactly.
start
Start
recruiting.
recruiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point you just said. I think a lot of companies don't plan.
Correct.
They stay based on the past, so
Correct.
they're not really working on the present and the future, and especially the future of when to add more individuals.
Yep. The budget would help you understand that on paper, right? I think, but it's a big decision, and you need to make sure that you have all the data, as much data gathered and accumulated as you possibly can.
Yeah, you need to do a global view of your company and understand that you need the people, you need operations, right? You need
Yeah.
strong operations. Marketing is huge.
Marketing is huge.
You need good marketing. You need and how to track it versus do you use a CRM? What do you do? Because you might get all these leads, but they might go washed if you don't pay attention to it, if no one's calling them.
Let me ask you a question. You know, based upon scaling, infrastructure, et cetera, what's your feedback on doing this third party versus doing it internally?
Getting a vendor?
Yeah, vendors to do this stuff for you.
I mean, we've gone through it,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of vendors out there that make all these promises, but at the end of the day, you got to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And you got to guide them in the right direction, and you kind of need a bulldog in your organization to drill them and make sure they're doing their job properly.
I think that's important for everybody to understand too. Is like, you know, it's okay for you to treat your third party vendors that are handling infrastructure positions for you as team members. You know what I mean? It's like you can beat them up as a team member, and you can celebrate them as a team member. But a lot of people are afraid. Afraid may be a strong word, but are afraid to, get in somebody's, face because they're disappointed on results.
Yeah, and that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with accountants.
I want it done this way. No, you don't need it done this way. I want it done this way. No, you don't need it done this way. Yeah, I think the challenge for us too, and just for the listeners, is, how do you build the value calculation to feel like you have a good spend, with respect to third-party vendors versus, scaling your infrastructure internally.
I think that's all percentages of your profit and losses. So, as you know, marketing should be 3 to 4% in the dental scope.
Except, yes, we agree on that. For the
Except-
most part.
Yeah, and then accounting, I don't know, 3 to 4% as well of the overall revenue. So you need and payroll is 20 to 23%, right? Some organizations run slimmer at 18.
Yeah.
We're personally at 21 to 22% month after month, but we have over 75 individuals now. Plus, we have management support out of Sarasota, so we have a lot of team members working to operate this company efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just says a lot, because look where we are, and we already have all this infrastructure in place. And from experience, just understand that, it took a while for us to get to this point.
Yeah, patience.
Patience. And it was like, oh, I'm not sure. And then, you build the data, and you're like, okay, let's do it. And, for the most part, it's worked out so far.
Yeah, it's like I said last time, it took me almost 7 years before I created the mission, the vision, and the values, because I didn't have a coach or anyone teaching me this type of stuff.
Yep.
Like, these conversations that you and I are having right now are priceless. Like,
I agree.
If somebody would have told me all this, I would have been 10 steps ahead. So this is a lot of great knowledge that everyone's getting. So, I missed one other thing. So I said the people,
Yeah.
operations, which in that you got IT and all the different systems that go with it, marketing, and the financials.
Yeah.
Those are the 4 to 5 most important things to run a company and before you start scaling.
Yeah, and I think that when you're scaling your accounting, you really need to build that part of your organization based upon your needs and based upon your preferences. You know what I mean? Whether it be a third-party vendor, an accounting firm, there's a million accounting firms out there these days, or an accountant that you bring in internally, they need to build this thing exactly how you want it built. And I think that's a part of infrastructure too, and that's part of the struggles that entrepreneurs have, is you bring in an individual with a lot of experience. Well, that individual is doing it a certain way because they've been doing it this way for years and years and years, and you have a disconnect.
Exactly.
You think it's a waste of a spend. Well, it's probably not a waste of the spend. It's probably just something that happened with respect to mission, vision, values.
That's correct. And I mean, I think that we were at cash-based accounting for years.
Yes.
And, once you start scaling, you got to start going into something called accrued accounting,
Yep.
which most people don't even understand what that means.
Yep.
So there's a lot of moving parts before you can decide when to start scaling.
And man, if you really talk about this stuff, we could talk about this stuff for hours. Like, here's an example. You brought up a great point. Cash versus accrued, and I think that's part of scaling your business, and that's part of understanding where you need to go. Because a lot of smaller entrepreneurs expense everything, right?
Yeah.
Because they want that tax deduction. Well, maybe that's not the best win at that moment. Maybe you shouldn't write a check for that equipment. Maybe you should finance that equipment, put it on your balance sheet. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different things, a lot of different nuances in respect to that.
For tax perspective.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting.
No, I agree. I think that, I've done those same mistakes myself, because you think less debt is sometimes better.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your company's based on the EBITDA and how much money you're actually taking home, right? That's the health of the business.
Yep.
So if you write off everything through the business, your business is worth a lot less.
Correct. Yeah, expense everything, and your EBIT is low, and then you're wondering why you didn't get what you thought you were going to get.
Yeah, like for a lot of these businesses, like for every dollar that you write off, you're leaving $10 out on the table for a sale one day or whenever you're ready to exit.
And I think infrastructure is, scaling and all of that encompasses that is, it all funnels back into how is it going to impact EBITDA? How is it going to impact the financials? Because ultimately, everybody wants to make sure that their organization is as profitable as possible.
Yeah. I think, like, this is the last thing I'm going to say. I think before you go ahead and you start scaling, I think the most important element is just make sure that you have systems, protocols, and procedures, which are, SOPs. Your team is completely trained. You have to have somebody in your organization that can go out and start training these other new hires. You need to have enough people to support the growth. And you need to make sure that your operational team is good, your financial team is good, and maybe you could wait a little bit on your marketing, but the most important things are operations, financials, and the people.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where we caught up, was when we started scaling, and we started scaling our infrastructure. We missed out on an opportunity to make sure that those individuals were trained the right way. We were like, what's going on with, so-and-so? Well, they can't do the job. Well, were they trained right? Well, we spent a week with them. Like, it's got to be longer than that,
Yeah, that's the issue. You train them for a week or two and you think they're going to go run a multi-million-dollar practice. That's just not the way things work.
It's just not the way it's going to work. So when you're building your infrastructure, when you're scaling your infrastructure, make sure that you incorporate some kind of development and training in there, because that will impact your organization bigger than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, no matter how many times you train them, you got to continue to invest in them
for sure.
With different resources and different academies or courses, or, spending a lot more time with them, developing them, because this is an ongoing field where you're always going to have major changes.
And I think that for the younger organizations, I think that's something that they really don't think about. Like, training and development is crucial to the success of the scaling of your organization. And a lot of people are like, hey, you know what? I have Susie, who's been with me from day one. Well, she can train everybody.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily how it always works out.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not sure if Susie's even doing it the right way.
Exactly correct.
So I think a good way to grow very quickly, if you're really interested in fast growth, is to actually try to find an organization that's for sale.
Yeah.
That might not be managed properly or might have certain individuals that are important, but that you go out there and you acquire for, pennies on the dollar if possible. And then you get all the systems that they already have and you combine them with yours. Yep. And you continue to improve your organization at a fast pace growth rate, at a faster rate, basically.
I think that, I mean, we haven't even touched on merge and acquisition, but that's a whole nother topic for another day, because that can get really interesting.
Well,
quick.
I mean, that's a recommendation that I recommend for quick scaling, is to go out and find groups that are available if you're interested in growing quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
But just make sure you have enough working capital to sustain it.
That's correct. You might have enough to buy the practices, but do you have enough to?
Enough reserve to keep it going.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy, for being a part of the show today. Like
was
always,
awesome. Always.
It's a pleasure. You can listen to us at our podcasts at YouTube, Spotify, and follow us on Dr. Alex A. Plains. Thank you.